Today, we're diving into a single law that for decades built a kind of firewall to keep the U.S. government's foreign messaging away from its own people. It's called the Smith-Mundt Act, and honestly, understanding it is key to making sense of our media world today.
So, let's just cut right to the chase with a really direct question. Can the U.S. government legally aim propaganda at you, an American citizen? For a very, very long time, the answer was a simple and clear no. But that's changed, and the story of how we got from no to, well, it's complicated, is what we're going to unpack.
For more than 60 years, that answer was a hard no. But then came 2013, when a little-known change to the law basically rewrote the rulebook. To really get a grip on what that change means, we have to go back to when the original rule was first put in place.
So let's talk about this idea of a propaganda firewall. This wasn't a real wall, of course. It was a legal wall, built right after World War II for a very, very specific reason. And here it is, the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948. It was designed to do two things. First, it gave the government the green light to engage in what's called public diplomacy overseas. You know, spreading messages about American culture and values. But the second part, and this is the crucial bit, is that it strictly prohibited that same stuff from being aimed at the American public.
Now, the fear driving this law was fresh. It came straight out of the experience of World War II. Lawmakers had just seen how incredibly powerful state-run propaganda could be, with broadcasters like Japan's Tokyo Rose or Nazi Germany's Lord Haha using the radio to try and crush Allied morale. The whole point of Smith-Mundt was to let America compete in that global arena of ideas while making damn sure that powerful tool could never be turned back on its own people.
So, what did this no propaganda at home rule actually look like in the real world? How did this firewall work day in and day out?
The dividing line was purely based on geography. It was actually pretty simple. The government's international radio station Voice of America could broadcast deep into the Soviet Union, no problem. But it was literally illegal for that same programming to be aired in Kansas. U.S. embassies could hand out pamphlets on democracy in other countries, but they could not distribute those same pamphlets in Los Angeles. The line was drawn right at the U.S. border.
So the fundamental idea was this. Anything the State Department or other agencies made to influence people overseas was treated like it was for export only. It was kept separate, behind a sturdy bureaucratic wall.
And for decades, this system actually held up. But then, a technology came along that has absolutely no respect for geography. The internet didn't just weaken the firewall, it shattered it.
This created what people started calling the boomerang effect. A video produced by the U.S. government for an audience in Afghanistan could get uploaded to YouTube, and in an instant, someone in Cleveland could be watching it. The law was built on borders. But the internet makes borders meaningless. The firewall was full of holes.
You can really see the whole story unfold right here on this timeline. In '48, the firewall goes up. Through the Cold War, the U.S. gets really good at projecting this soft power with outlets like Radio Free Europe. But then the 2000s hit, and the internet just makes that wall porous. And that all leads to the big moment in 2013 when the Modernization Act officially takes down the domestic ban, which brings us to today. A completely borderless information war fought on all of our screens.
Now, the debate over making this change was intense. On one side, you had supporters arguing that the old rule was just obsolete, totally pointless in the internet age. They'd say, look, this material is already getting back into the U.S. anyway. Removing the ban just makes it transparent and honest. But opponents saw it very, very differently. They were afraid that this would open the floodgates, legally allowing the government to point its massive messaging apparatus right at its own people.
And in July of 2013, the change was made. The Smith-Mundt Modernization Act went into effect. And just like that, the 65-year-old ban on domestic dissemination was officially over.
So that brings us to right now. We are living in a brand new, borderless information war. And it's worth asking why this seemingly obscure legal tweak matters so much to us today.
The reason governments create all this content comes down to this idea of soft power. This isn't about military might or economic punishments. It's about a country's ability to shape what other people want through attraction and persuasion. It's about winning hearts and minds, and it's a critical tool in international politics.
And let's be crystal clear. The United States is far from the only one playing this game. It's a global phenomenon.
The UK has its legendary BBC World Service. Russia has RT. China has CGTN. For decades, every major world power has run its own international media outlets to project its influence and its version of the story.
So really, the bottom line is that using information as a tool of the state is universal. It's just part of the modern political toolkit. The only real difference between nations is how transparent they choose to be about what they're doing.
I think the best way to picture this whole shift is with this analogy. Think of U.S. government-funded media before 2013 as export-only beer. It was brewed to be sold overseas, and you just couldn't buy it here. After 2013, that export-only label was removed. Now that same beer is available on the domestic shelf.
And what's the result of all this? The line that once clearly separated government-made content for foreign eyes from the domestic news that you and I consume, well, that line has now been officially and permanently blurred.
Which leaves us all with one final, and I think really important question. The old law built that firewall to shield citizens. That firewall is now gone. So in a world where information flows everywhere, instantly, without borders, who is responsible for building the firewall now?